Hi, how you doing? Waiting for the train? Yeah, me too. Yeah, just sitting in the station, waiting for a train. You know, one of the first movies ever made was just a shot of a train arriving at a station. That's all it was, you know? I mean, this was back in like the 1890s. Movies were so simple back then. You know, decades later, there's this a French film director named Jean-Luc Godard who saw this film and he said that cinema is not the station, cinema is the train. Sounds deep, right? I have no idea what that means. Probably some argument he had with Francois Truffaut, I guess. I don't know. Still, though, I love movies, though, don't you? Aren't they beautiful? They're wonderful things. They're so amazing. You know, one of my favorite films is called The Searchers by John Ford. Have you ever seen The Searchers? The Searchers. It's this old John Ford Western with John Wayne. Oh, well, you missed a great picture. Yeah, I love that movie, though. You know, I love movies in general. Ever since I was a little kid, watching James Cagney and Humphrey Bogart in those Warner Brothers gangster films, like Angels with Dirty Faces and Casablanca, of course. And you know, I've always wanted to make movies too, but you know, you got to learn how to do that. It's a complicated process. And there's this film school at New York University, that will teach people how to make movies. And I want to go so bad. I'd love to go there, but you know, on the application, you have to submit a film that you've made. I mean, that hardly seems fair to me, right? Like, that's what I want to go there to learn how to do, and they want me to submit a film that I've made? I mean, how am I supposed to do that, you know? Like, what is cinema? How am I supposed to take a camera, right, and go out and do something that's creative and unique and original and inventive, and something that at the same time is good enough to get me into the best film school in the world? It's impossible. You know, Steven Spielberg, in 2002, he went back to Cal State Long Beach to finish his degree. It's kind of like a show that education's important or something, you know? And to get credit for the advanced filmmaking class, he submitted Schindler's List. You believe that? You believe the nerve on this guy? He's Schindler's List. I mean, they gave him credit for the class, obviously, because it's Schindler's List, but still, like, you know, but I can't do that, you know, right? Like, I'm not Steven Spielberg, the billionaire king of Hollywood. I mean, he even owns the sled from Citizen Kane. I'm nobody. I've never directed a film, least of all Schindler's List. And, you know, I don't have, like, a big film studio or all the resources and money that he has for that. I can't take a submarine to the bottom of the ocean like James Cameron did to shoot a movie. So how am I supposed to make a good movie? Still, though, I mean, I have to do it because it's required for this application. I want to go to this school, so I got to make a movie. So I said, all right, look, so I'll try to get some ideas, right? I look at what other filmmakers have done. Because, you know, Andre Bazin, he says that film is just a technical process, a means for expressing a complex idea. So it's all about having a good idea. And I need a really good one, right? So I started looking at other filmmakers. And the first one I looked at was Martin Scorsese, obviously, right? So, you know, Marty, he wanted to be a priest. But they kicked him out of seminary school for fighting during prayers. So instead he went to this NYU, this film school, and learned how to make movies. And one of his first feature film is called Who's That Knocking at My Door? And one of the first scenes in the film is just this really kind of weird scene where Harvey Keitel is just sitting next to this woman on a bench waiting for the Staten Island ferry. And he asks her if she's ever seen The Searchers, and she says no. And so she's never seen it, and he loves it. So he just goes on and on and on in this like big, like 10-minute rant about how great The Searchers is. But you know, my point is that that's it. That's Scorsese's first scene and his first feature is just Harvey Keitel and this woman sitting on this bench talking about how great John Ford and The Searchers are and John Wayne, and that's it. You know, another filmmaker I looked at was Richard Linklater, and you know, the guy who directed Boyhood that came out last year. Well, anyway, his first film was called Slacker. And that's a really weird film too. It's like the camera just sort of like follows these people around on an afternoon in Austin, Texas, just eavesdropping on their conversations, listening to each other tell each other stories, you know, and just observing different things that happen, stuff like that, you know. But it's not boring though. It's a really stimulating and engaging film because it makes you think about all these ideas and it really like grabs your attention. You know what I mean? But I can't do a film like that, you know, like Scorsese or Linklater's films. I mean, it's too obvious. It's unoriginal. It's boring. It's been done. Like, you know, I can't just sit down on a bench and start talking about movies like a crazy person. And nobody wants to see that. You know what I mean? It's all been done. It's unoriginal. It's too obvious. It's not. You know, these people at this film school are going to look at this and be like, oh, look at that. Look at this arrogant little kid. He thinks he knows everything about movies. Well, good. If he knows everything about movies, then he doesn't need to come to our film school. Boom, rejected. Anyway, today's movies are all different, you know? Like, you need lots of like intense action, fast editing. You gotta have like witty dialogue delivered by well-dressed, well-trained actors. You can't just sit down and start talking about movies. Like, you can't just sit down on a bench next to a person and start talking. It doesn't work. Modern audiences don't want to see that, you know? Modern audiences are used to Snapchat and Facebook and Instagram and BuzzFeed articles, SportsCenter highlight reels. Some are blockbuster movies, you know? They don't want to see two people talk on a bench. It's boring. It's been done. So then I thought about this. I said, look, right, listen, like, if I don't know how to make a film, why don't I just make a film about me not knowing how to make a film, right? Well, I threw that idea out immediately, though, because that's the most unoriginal idea of all. Like, I mean, that's been done 1,000 times in every art form, too. I mean, like, there's plays about writing plays, books about writing books, songs about writing songs. And cinema's no different. Film's no different about this. You know, there's Federico Fellini's 8½, Vincent Minnelli's The Bad and the Beautiful, 2 Weeks in Another Town. Then there's Woody Allen's film, Stardust Memories, which itself copies from 8½. And then Preston Sturges made that one beautiful film called Sullivan's Travels about this director who he watches films in this church, and there's this great scene where he has this like epiphany about movies and everything. I love that film. And there's another film called Adaptation that came out recently with Nicolas Cage, and it was a brilliant film, but it was like really strange. It was like gonzo screenwriting. You know, it was a movie about a screenwriter trying to write the screenplay for the movie based on this book. But anyway, my point is that I can't do that, right? It's unoriginal, it's too obvious, it's been done so many times that I can't do that. And, you know, everybody looks at this film Slacker by Linklater and they say, oh, look at that. You know, Richard Linklater, he made a great film. He didn't go to film school. All he had was a camera and a few of his friends on an afternoon in Austin, Texas. Nobody needs to go to film school to learn how to make movies. Well, see, that's part of the genius of that film. It looks really simple, but in reality, Richard Linklater spent an entire decade watching like 3 films a day, reading every book about movies he could get his hands on, and making short film after short film that just sort of piled up in his closet. So he went to film school. He went to film school 4 times over. It's a lot of work. And you know, then there's that quote by Quentin Tarantino. Somebody asked him, where did you go to film school? And he said, I didn't go to film school, I went to films. That's very cute, right? But you know, the truth of that matter is that Tarantino was some sort of like savant genius guy he spent like a decade or something working in a video rental store, watching thousands and thousands of movies, and you know, like just being obsessed with movies for a decade. But you know, I can't do that. You know, I'm nobody. I'm not a savant. I'm not a genius. And Harvey Keitel is not going to appear in my first feature film. And you know something else? If you really look closely at Quentin Tarantino's films, all he does is rip off other directors and other films. I mean, that's all he does. It's every time. Like, he's ripped off every kung fu movie, B-movie, and blaxploitation film ever made, and he plagiarizes Sergio Leone in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly every single time he makes a film. You know, even though he just keeps ripping off other people's stuff, it's genius, and I love it every single time. But you know, I mean, it's obviously not fair to single out Quentin Tarantino for this, right? I mean, everybody's just plagiarizing something else from somebody, you know? Like, people do that all the time in cinema. There's this one French film director named Robert Bresson, and he was all obsessed with this idea of like captivity versus freedom and everything, and he made this film in 1959 called Pickpocket. And at the end of the film, this guy, he steals from people and he gets thrown in jail, and at the end of the film, there's this scene where this woman that he's in love with comes to visit him in prison, and they go to these like prison bars, and they like touch through these prison bars, and it's just like this beautiful moment of just transcendence and love, you know? And Paul Schrader is an American screenwriter and director, and he loves this film director and this particular scene in this film so much that he just copied it, just straight up copied it at the end of his film American Gigolo about 20 years later in 1980 with Richard Gere. And but then, you know, after that, he said it was kind of just like a meaningless reference, you know? I mean, he just plagiarized it because he loves the scene so much. But then, you know, 11 years after that, he makes another film called Light Sleeper with Willem Dafoe. And at the end of that film, he realizes, you know, this scene would work much, much better here. So he plagiarizes the same scene again. You believe that? I mean, he copied the same scene twice, and nobody sued him or not. I mean, like, if he tried that in any other art form, they would have sued the mustache off his face. But you know, you can go on endlessly with examples of this because everybody who makes a movie is just plagiarizing something from someone else in some way. I mean, even Spike Lee, who's a professor at this school, NYU in New York City, his best film is called Do the Right Thing. And it's a great movie, but he's got this character named Radio Raheem, and he tells this story about this like eternal conflict between love and hate and the struggle between them two. And he tells the story, he's got brass knuckles that he wears, and he goes right up to the camera, right, and tells the story, and it says love on the right hand and hate on the left. And he goes right up into the camera and punches like this and tells about love and hate fighting it out. And it's a really great story, it's brilliantly done, but it's copied almost verbatim from Charles Lofton's 1955 film Night of the Hunter with Robert Mitchum. Except, you know, in that one, Robert Mitchum does it with tattoos instead of brass knuckles. But it's the same story. And, you know, at some level, pretty much everybody's just ripping off Alfred Hitchcock, you know. I mean, let's be honest, right? Speaking of ripping off Hitchcock, there's this one director who's a good director. His name is Gus Van Sant. But probably the low point of his career is when he did a shot-for-shot remake of Alfred Hitchcock's masterpiece, Psycho. Except he did it in color, and he cast Vince Vaughn as Norman Bates. And you know, everybody gives him a really hard time about this because he like ruined a masterpiece or whatever, but I think it's a really fascinating example of filmmaking because it shows that even though it's the same movie, right, shot-for-shot remake, it's different and original in some ways, and you know that it's different and original precisely because it sucks. And see, that's something that's like miraculously unique about cinema and movies, you know? I mean, movies are not these flickering images on a screen like everybody thinks. It's not that at all. It's a fantasy. See, it's a dream in the mind of the audience. So it doesn't matter really if it's the same story, the same actor, or even the exact same shot. If the dream is different, then the film is different because that dream is the film. So, you know, there is no, like, you know, everything in cinema is plagiarized and original at the same time. So there isn't any real true plagiarism in cinema. Except, of course, I guess, shooting a Western in Monument Valley, that would be plagiarizing John Ford. But my point is that cinema, movies, they either have something powerful that moves an audience and it impacts them, or they don't, and that's it, and that's as far as it goes, you know? And that's why Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho works, and Van Zant's Psycho doesn't, and that's it. That's the whole thing. You know, somebody one time asked the director Sam Fuller, what is cinema? And he answered and he said that film is like a battleground between love and hate. In one word, it's emotion, is what he said. And there's this Russian film director named Andrei Tarkovsky who said that in cinema, it is not necessary to explain, but to act upon the viewer's feelings, and the emotion that is awoken is what provokes thought. So cinema doesn't have to be original, it just has to have life. It has to be alive and bleeding and full of these thoughts, emotions, and feelings, but it does not have to be original. Originality is all just an illusion anyway, you know? Like everything that you say, think, do, or feel is all just based on a collection of prior experiences. It's all based on things that you've seen other people say, think, do, and feel. You know, you're just mimicking other people. So originality is all, in any part of life, just an illusion anyway, and art and cinema is no different, you know? Everyone is just copying things that they've seen other people do. Orson Welles, one of the great directors of all time, in 1973 he made this film called F for Fake, and it's like this video essay all about this real-life art forger, and he would do all these paintings and he would sign the names of other painters like Monet, Matisse, or Renoir, or whoever. And then he would take these forged paintings and sell them to art dealers and get rich doing this by stealing the ideas and the styles and the names of these other artists. And you know, Wells, he basically makes the point that if these paintings hang long enough, they become real. You know, so you know, everything turns to ashes and dust in the end anyway, so maybe a man's name doesn't really matter so much. And at the end of this film, F for Fake, he tells this story about this guy who gets a hold of a bunch of Picasso's original paintings, and he does a bunch of forgeries of them and then burns Picasso's originals. And you know, Picasso finds out about this and he's furious. You know, he's really upset, obviously. But you know, Picasso himself once said that good artists copy, but great artists steal. So from a certain point of view, that guy who did the forgeries of Picasso's paintings was a greater artist than Picasso ever was. And apparently, when it comes to cinema, it doesn't really matter if it's plagiarized or not, as long as it's good, as long as it has emotion, as long as it's alive and bleeding. That's all that really matters when it comes to cinema. Maybe all that matters is the art, the idea, and the emotion and thought it invokes, even though none of it lasts. And at the end of the film, Wells basically makes the point that our songs will all be silenced, but what of it? Go on singing. But still though, I mean, you know, you look at this film Slacker, and it just seems like such an impossibly simple film, you know? Like, how can that be a good movie? How can something as simple as just walking and talking with a bunch of your random friends on an afternoon in Austin, Texas be a good movie? Like, if that's a good movie, then, like, what the hell is a movie anyway, you know? And how do you tell if it's good or not? And beyond that, who's to officially stand up and say what is and is not a good movie, and why? Like, who makes that decision, you know? I guess the admissions department at NYU, right? Oh gosh, I mean, they taught Scorsese, so they ought to know. You know, Linklater, he begins this film Slacker. He starts off with just these shots of him arriving at this bus station. And he gets off the bus and gets into this cab and he starts telling this taxi driver about multiverse theory of all things, you know? And multiverse, it's like the idea, you know, every time a consciousness in this universe encounters a decision point, there's two alternate paths that could go, and each one of those two different paths becomes an alternate reality, an alternate universe. So it's like, you know, an infinite number of monkeys typing an infinite number of typewriters for an infinite amount of time, infinite number of universes type of thing, right? Anyway, it's a really strange scene, and this taxi driver, he just sits there, he doesn't say anything the whole time. Well, he just rants about multiverse theory, and then at the end of this scene, Linklater, he concludes by telling this taxi driver that, you know, he should have just stayed in the station. He says, I should have just stayed in the station, because if I'd stayed in the station, then I would have met like a beautiful woman and fallen in love. It's like one of the alternate universes, you know? And that actually is what happens in Martin Scorsese's Who's That Knocking at My Door? Harvey Keitel and this woman waiting on this bench for the Staten Island ferry, they fall in love with each other. But you know, I don't really know why Linklater shot that scene. You know, it's really just a weird scene. Like, who tells a taxi driver about multiverse theory? You know, I don't know what he meant by any of that. I mean, I don't know. Maybe he was trying to say something about, you know, how like in life sometimes there's so many options and opportunities and possibilities and different ways that we can go and things we can do that it becomes overwhelming and it's like impossible to make a decision. It's impossible to make an intelligent decision and commit to it because we have no way of knowing if what we're doing is right or wrong. It's like, you know, there's this film called Mr. Nobody with Jared Leto, And he plays the last mortal man dying on his deathbed, and there's this reporter there interviewing about this, and he talks about this idea, this problem in life, this impossibility of choosing and trying to make a decision in the face of this total uncertainty that everyone faces. And he references this chess term called zugzwang, which basically means obligated to move. In other words, you have to make a move because it's your turn, but any move that you make will make you worse off than you are now. That's kind of the way I feel with this application. You know, I have to submit this application because I want to go to this film school, and I have to make a film to submit it on this application. But any film I make won't be good enough, and it won't get me in, and I just... Cinema is not the station. Cinema is the train. Cinema is not the station. Cinema is the train. I have no idea what the hell that means. Maybe if I understood that, then I can make a movie. But I doubt it. I doubt it very much. I don't think it would have explained anything. It's just another piece of a jigsaw puzzle. A missing piece. You know, the funny thing is, though, no matter who I talk to about this, they all ask me the same question. Why? Why do you want to do this? Why is this so important to you? You know, like, why did you watch Raging Bull 15 times in 1 week? Why did you stay up all night reading Sergei Eisenstein's essays on film form again? Why do you care so much about the difference between Billy Wilder and William Wyler? Why are you watching Kubrick films at 4 a.m.? And like all these questions, why? Why do you want to do this? Why is it so important? Why do you, of all these people, why do you, of all people, deserve to go to NYU, one of the best film schools in the world? And I can never explain that, you know what I mean? I can never find the words to put that, like, in a way that people can understand that. I can never tell anybody that. There's this film from 1946 called The Red Shoes, directed by Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburger, and it's all about this ballet production company. It's a lot like Darren Aronofsky's film The Black Swan, if you've ever seen that. But anyway, one of the main characters in this film is this big shot ballet producer, and he runs this ballet production company. And early on in the film, he says that ballet is my religion, and he's talking to this young dancer that wants to dance for his production company, and he asks her this question, why do you want to dance? And she asks him, why do you want to live? And he's a little surprised by this, you know, he doesn't really know what to say, but he goes, I don't know why exactly, but I must. And she says, well, that's my answer too, and that's my answer too, but I can't. I saw somebody ask Dustin Hoffman the same question. Why do you do this? Why do you do what you do? And he quoted Picasso, who said, if they took away my pastels, I would use crayons. If they took away my crayons, I would use pencils. If they stripped me naked and threw me in prison, I would spit on my finger and paint on the walls. And I would go one step further to say, if they gagged my mouth, I would slit my wrists and bleed you a sermon, and that would be called cinema. So I have to get into this film school. It takes 1,000 years of rejected applications because cinema is my religion. Because they kicked Martin Scorsese out of seminary school. I don't know why exactly, but I must make movies. They want to film on this application, and I have to make it, and it has to be good. How am I supposed to make that decision? How am I supposed to do that? Cinema is not the station, cinema is the train. I don't know what the hell that means, but I do know that I want to get out of the station and onto the train, and they sell tickets at this film school in New York University. And if I don't get in, I'm going to have some horrible, sick, Forrest Gump type of life, sitting in a station waiting for a train that's never going to come, next to a bunch of people who haven't even fucking seen The Searchers. I want a movie on this application. It has to be a good movie, and it has to be alive, and it has to be bleeding, it has to be full of emotion and thought, and it has to be beautiful and original. But what if I can't do it? What if I can't think of anything good? What if I can't do anything good and original and alive? What if I don't get in, huh? What am I going to do then? You know, in that film, Mr. Nobody, with Jared Leto dying in that hospital bed, he talks about these things. Right after he quotes that term, zugzwang, about not being able to choose, immediately after that, he quotes Tennessee Williams, who said that every path is the right path, and everything could have been anything else and would have exactly as much meaning. And I think about that, and I think about Picasso and those forged paintings, and all those films and filmmakers that just copy and steal from other films and filmmakers, and I think maybe they're right. Maybe Tarantino and Orson Welles, maybe they're right. Maybe the only true way to make a great movie is if I just take someone else and put my name on it and call it my own. Just steal someone else's thing. So you know what, maybe the greatest achievement in the history of cinema would be if I just submitted Schindler's List. Just straight up, just put my name on it, say I wrote it, directed, produced it, and just submit Schindler's List. Why not? If the history of cinema is the history of stealing and great artists copy, then the greatest achievement in the history of cinema would be me stealing that movie. I'll tell you why not. I'll tell you exactly why not. I'll tell you why not, because they didn't sue Paul Schrader and they didn't sue Gus Van Sant, but if I did that, boy, they would sue me in the end, I promise you. Just as sure as the turning of the earth. I don't know. Maybe not, I don't know. I'm not Martin Scorsese or John Ford. I'm nobody. I don't know what to make a movie about. I don't know what to do. Maybe Linklater is right. Maybe I should just stay in the station.
Jesus, come.